The case management system flagged 17 conflict alerts at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when no one should have been in the office. I stared at my monitor, coffee growing cold as the red warning indicators blinked across my screen like emergency lights. Each alert showed the same pattern: shadow case codes assigned to my active files, creating artificial conflicts that would force me off major cases. Someone had been busy while I slept. My name is Garrett Davenport. At 42, I've spent the last 8 years as a municipal law partner at our Delaware corporate practice, handling everything from zoning disputes to public contract negotiations. The work pays well, the hours are predictable, and I've built a reputation for keeping municipal clients happy. Nothing about my practice should generate conflict alerts. I clicked through each warning. The shadow codes were sophisticated. Mirror files created with slight variations in client names and case numbers. Whoever did this understood our conflict checking protocols intimately. They knew exactly how to trigger the system's safeguards without leaving obvious fingerprints. The first compromised file was the Riverside Development Project, a $12 million municipal contract I'd been negotiating for 6 months. The shadow code showed a fictitious opposing party with interests that would disqualify me from representation. The second was the Harbor District rezoning case, worth $8 million in potential fees over 2 years. Same pattern. I pulled up the access logs. The shadow codes had been created using administrative credentials, entered during off hours when the building's security cameras would show empty hallways. The timestamp showed 2:15 a.m. last Friday. I remembered that night. I'd left the office at 9, gone straight home, had dinner with my neighbor Clark Ashford, who'd stopped by to discuss his property tax appeal. My hands moved across the keyboard, checking deeper into the system. The conflict alerts weren't random. Every compromised case represented significant revenue, long-term client relationships, or high-profile municipal work that enhanced the firm's reputation. Someone was systematically dismantling my practice from the inside. The office felt different when I arrived early the next morning. Partners nodded their usual greetings. Associates hurried past with case files, and the compliance advisor, Isadora Ashford, smiled warmly as she passed my office. Everything appeared normal, but the conflict alerts had changed something fundamental. Trust, once broken in a law firm, spreads like a virus through every interaction. I'd printed the conflict reports and locked them in my desk drawer. The call was clear, but the motive remained hidden. Who would benefit from forcing me off these cases? Who had administrative access and intimate knowledge of our conflict-checking procedures? The morning partners meeting was scheduled for 10. I sat in my office, watching colleagues prepare for another routine day, knowing that someone among them had spent their weekend destroying my career one shadow code at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your billing reconciliation report. Third quarter discrepancies. You'll want to see this before the meeting. The anonymous text had arrived at the perfect moment. I pulled up the billing reconciliation system, my fingers moving quickly across the keyboard as the partners' meeting approached. The third quarter report loaded slowly, each line item appearing like in a criminal case. There it was. Billing code 4471SH had generated $127,000 in fees over 3 months. The problem was simple. That code didn't exist in our approved billing structure. Someone had created a shadow billing code, just like the conflict codes, and had been routing fees through it systematically. I traced the transactions backward. Every bill under code 4471SH corresponded to work I'd performed on legitimate cases, but the fees had been redirected to a separate account. The Harbor District rezoning case alone showed $43,000 in misdirected billing. The Riverside Municipal Authority contract showed another $38,000. My work, my billable hours, my client relationships, all generating revenue that disappeared into an unauthorized account. The access logs told the same story. Administrative credentials, off-hours entry, timestamps that matched the conflict code creation. Someone with intimate knowledge of our systems had been stealing from me for months, using my own cases to fund their scheme while simultaneously disqualifying me from continuing that work. I printed the billing reports and locked them with the conflict. The pattern was becoming clear, but I needed more proof before making accusations that could destroy careers and partnerships. The partners' meeting started without incident. Managing partner Clark Ashford reviewed quarterly performance metrics while I sat quietly, studying faces around the conference table. Isadora Ashford, our compliance advisor, presented her quarterly ethics report with professional confidence. She'd implemented new conflict-checking procedures, she explained, to ensure the firm maintained the highest standards of professional responsibility. These enhanced protocols, she said, have already identified several potential conflicts that might have gone unnoticed under our previous system. We've successfully avoided ethical violations that could have resulted in bar complaints or client lawsuits. I watched her present the very system she'd corrupted. The irony was perfect, using ethics compliance as cover for systematic theft and sabotage. She fielded questions about the new procedures, with expertise that came from intimate knowledge of exactly how to circumvent them. After the meeting, I returned to my office and began the real investigation. The billing system kept detailed logs of every transaction, every code creation, every account modification. I needed to trace the money trail and document the administrative access that made this scheme possible. The Shado billing account led to a business checking account opened 3 months ago. The account holder was listed as Municipal Legal Consulting LLC, a company that didn't exist in Delaware's corporate database. The registered agent was a mail forwarding service in Wilmington. I called the bank directly, identifying myself as an attorney investigating potential fraud. The account had been opened with proper identification and initial deposit, but the signature card showed a name I didn't recognize. Ashford. Not Isadora Ashford, but close enough to pass casual scrutiny while maintaining plausible deniability. My phone rang. Clark Ashford's voice was urgent. "Garrett, we need to talk. Can you come to my office immediately?" I walked down the hall, carrying the printed-in a manila folder. Clark's office overlooked the Delaware River, and he stood at the window with his back to me when I entered. "I received an interesting call this morning," he said without turning around. "A client complaint about billing irregularities. The Harbor District's finance director noticed discrepancies in our invoices, charges for work that wasn't performed, billing codes that don't match our standard structure." I set the folder on his desk. "I've been investigating the same issues." He turned and opened the folder, scanning the conflict reports and billing reconciliation data. His expression shifted from concern to anger as he processed the tray. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "At least 3 months, possibly longer. Someone with administrative access has been creating shadow codes to steal billing and trigger false conflicts. The pattern suggests intimate knowledge of our systems and client relationships." Clark studied the access logs. "These timestamps show after-hours entry. Who has administrative credentials?" 3 people. You, me, and our compliance advisor." The silence stretched between us. We both understood the implications, but neither wanted to voice them directly. Isadora Ashford had been with the firm for 2 years, hired specifically to strengthen our ethics compliance after a minor bar complaint had cost us a municipal contract. "We need more before making accusations," Clark said finally. "This kind of allegation could destroy the firm's reputation even if we're wrong." I nodded, but privately disagreed. The umpo was already overwhelming. The question wasn't whether Isadora had committed these acts, but how extensive the scheme had become, and whether other partners or clients were involved. That afternoon, I received another anonymous text. "Check the client trust account reconciliation. October transactions. Pattern recognition software flagged unusual activity." The trust account record showed the same systematic manipulation. Small amounts, never enough to trigger automatic alerts, but consistent enough to create a significant total over time. The pattern suggested someone who understood exactly how much they could steal without detection. I was documenting the trust account discrepancies when my office door opened. Isadora Ashford entered without knocking, her usual professional smile replaced by something harder. "Working late again, Garrett?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "I noticed you've been accessing a lot of system reports lately. Quarterly review preparation?" I minimized the screen and turned to face her. "Just trying to understand some billing irregularities. Client questions, you know how it is." She moved closer to my desk, her eyes scanning the papers I'd hastily covered with a legal pad. Billing irregularities can be tricky. Sometimes the system generates false positives, especially with our new conflict checking protocols. I'd be happy to help you sort through any confusion. The offer sounded reasonable, but her tone carried an undertone I'd never heard before. This wasn't the helpful compliance advisor who'd implemented ethics training and streamlined our procedures. This was someone who knew exactly what I'd discovered and was calculating her next move. "I think I've got it handled," I said. "Just routine reconciliation work." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. But if you need any help with system access or account codes, just let me know. I designed most of these procedures myself." After she left, I sat in the growing darkness of my office, understanding that the investigation had entered a new phase. Isadora knew I was getting close, and her visit had been a warning disguised as an offer of help. I locked the in my desk drawer and prepared to leave, but my computer chimed with a new email. The sender was listed as System Administrator, but the message was clearly personal. "Stop digging, or the next conflict alert will be your last case at this firm." The anonymous email confirmed what I already suspected. Isadora wasn't just stealing from client accounts. She was prepared to destroy my career to protect herself. I printed the message and added it to my growing file of B and stew. The next morning, I called Clark Ashford at the Delaware State Bar. We'd worked together on several ethics committees, and I trusted his discretion. Within an hour, he was sitting across from my desk, reviewing the documentation I'd compiled. "This is substantial, Garrett," he said, studying the trust account records. "The Shado case codes are particularly sophisticated. She's been using legitimate conflict-checking protocols to mask unauthorized transfers. How long do you think this has been going on?" Clark flipped through the timeline I'd constructed. "Based on these patterns, at least 18 months, maybe longer." The amounts escalated gradually. Classic embezzlement progression. I handed him the threatening email. "She knows I'm investigating. This came after she visited my office last night." He read the message twice, his expression darkening. "This changes everything. We need to involve the Bar Council Investigation Unit immediately. I'll contact Marcus Reed. He specializes in attorney misconduct cases involving financial irregularities." Within 2 hours, Marcus Reed was in our conference room with a digital forensics specialist. They'd brought equipment to image our entire case management system and preserve the electronic before Isadora could attempt to destroy it. "We'll need to move quickly," Reed explained. "Once we begin the formal investigation, she'll likely realize the scope of what we've uncovered. Attorney disciplinary cases involving theft require immediate action to protect remaining client funds." The forensic specialist worked through the afternoon, creating mirror copies of our servers while Reed interviewed me about the discovery process. Every detail mattered. When I first noticed the discrepancies, how I'd tracked the Shado codes, what Isadora had said during her office visit. "The threatening email is particularly damaging," Reed noted. "It demonstrates consciousness of guilt and shows she's willing to intimidate witnesses. That elevates this beyond simple theft into obstruction of justice." By evening, they'd completed the preservation. Reed scheduled a formal interview with Isadora for the following morning, giving us one night to prepare for what would likely be a hostile confrontation. I arrived early the next day to find Isadora already in the conference room with her attorney, Clark Ashford's former partner, someone who specialized in defending attorneys against bar complaints. The irony wasn't lost on me. Reed conducted the interview with methodical precision, presenting each piece of Systematically: the Shado case codes, the trust account transfers, the timing patterns, the threatening email. Isadora's attorney tried to deflect, claiming system errors and misunderstandings, but the documentation was overwhelming. "Ms. Ashford," Reed said, "our forensic analysis shows these transfers were manually initiated using your administrative credentials. The Shado codes were created specifically to bypass our firm's standard conflict-checking procedures. How do you explain this? Isadora remained silent, but her attorney requested a brief recess. When they returned, he announced they were invoking her Fifth Amendment rights and terminating the interview. Reed wasn't surprised. We have sufficient to proceed with formal charges. The Bar Council will file a disciplinary complaint within 48 hours. Given the amount involved, over $200,000, criminal charges are also likely. The partnership meeting that afternoon was tense. Managing partner Clark Ashford outlined the situation to the other partners, explaining the investigation and the firm's exposure. Client notification would begin immediately, and we'd need to make full restitution from firm funds while pursuing recovery through our malpractice insurance. This is a catastrophic breach of trust, he said. Our reputation depends on how we handle the aftermath. Full cooperation with authorities, immediate client notification, and complete transparency with the bar. 3 days later, the Delaware State Bar filed formal disciplinary charges against Isadora. The complaint detailed 17 counts of misappropriation of client funds, 1 count of creating false records, and 1 count of intimidating a witness. Each count carried potential disbarment. The criminal investigation moved parallel to the bar proceedings. The Delaware Attorney General's office filed charges for theft, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Isadora's bail was set at $50,000, with conditions prohibiting her from accessing any attorney trust accounts. Our firm faced its own challenges. 2 clients filed malpractice suits, claiming we'd failed to properly supervise our compliance systems. The Delaware Supreme Court's Office of Disciplinary Counsel launched a separate investigation into our internal controls and oversight procedures. I spent weeks in depositions and interviews, explaining how the Shado code system had been designed to evade detection. The complexity of Isadora's scheme actually worked in our favor. It demonstrated that no reasonable oversight system could have caught such sophisticated manipulation. The bar hearing took place 6 months after my initial discovery. Reed presented them methodically, showing how Isadora had exploited her position as compliance advisor to create an elaborate theft scheme. Her defense attorney argued for mitigation, claiming personal financial difficulties and mental health issues, but the panel wasn't sympathetic. Ms. Ashford held a position of ultimate trust, the hearing officer stated. She was responsible for ensuring ethical compliance, yet she systematically violated the most fundamental duties of our profession. The aggravating factors, the sophisticated nature of the scheme, the extended time period, and the intimidation of a witness, require the most serious sanction. The panel voted unanimously for disbarment. Isadora would never practice law again in Delaware, and reciprocal discipline would likely follow in other jurisdictions where she held licenses. The criminal case concluded 2 months later. Isadora pleaded guilty to theft and money laundering charges, receiving a sentence of 3 years in prison with restitution requirements. The plea agreement required her to cooperate with ongoing investigations into similar schemes at other firms. During the aftermath, I helped 3 other attorneys who discovered similar irregularities at their firms. The Shado code technique wasn't unique to our situation. Isadora had apparently shared her methods with other compliance advisors through professional networks. Reed commended our firm's response during the final bar review. Your immediate cooperation and transparent handling of this matter demonstrates the profession's ability to self-regulate effectively. The clients affected have been made whole, and the systemic vulnerabilities have been addressed. The partnership voted to implement new oversight procedures, including dual authorization for all trust account transactions and quarterly independent audits of our case management systems. We also established a whistleblower policy protecting attorneys who report suspected misconduct. 6 months after the investigation began, I received a letter from the Delaware State Bar commending my role in uncovering the scheme. The letter noted that my careful documentation and prompt reporting had prevented additional losses and protected the integrity of the legal profession. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that justice had been served and that other potential victims had been protected from similar schemes. 12 months later, I stood in the conference room of my new practice in Wilmington, reviewing quarterly reports with my 3 associates. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating case files spread across our mahogany table. Starting over at 42 hadn't been easy. But building Davenport Legal from the ground up gave me control over every system, every procedure, every safeguard. No shadow codes. No mysterious billing alerts. No compliance advisors with hidden agendas. My phone buzzed with a text from Clark Pemberton. He'd left the old firm 6 months after the scandal, joining a boutique practice in Dover. Coffee next week? Have a referral for you. The referral network among former colleagues had become surprisingly strong. Trust, once broken and rebuilt, seemed more valuable than before. I opened my laptop and reviewed the morning's case management reports. Every transaction logged, every billing entry verified, every trust account movement documented with dual authorization. The systems I'd implemented weren't just about compliance, they were about peace of mind. A knock interrupted my review. Sarah Martinez, my newest associate, entered with a stack of discovery documents. "The Henderson merger is ready for your final review, Mr. Davenport." I'd hired Sarah after she'd contacted me about irregularities at her previous firm. Another compliance advisor. Another shadow code scheme. The pattern was spreading, but so was awareness. "Any red flags in the billing?" I asked. "Clean as always," she replied. "Your systems make it impossible to hide anything." That afternoon, I drove to Dover for a board meeting. 6 months ago, I created a nonprofit for wrongfully disbarred attorneys, helping them navigate reinstatement procedures and providing interim support. We'd already assisted 12 attorneys across 3 states. The irony wasn't lost on me. Isadora's betrayal had led to something constructive, a safety net for attorneys caught in similar schemes, and a resource for identifying systemic vulnerabilities in firm management. Reed called during my drive home. "Thought you'd want to know. We've identified 4 more firms using shadow code schemes. Your documentation helped us recognize the patterns." The investigation had expanded beyond Delaware. Bar associations in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Jersey were reviewing similar cases. The compliance advisor network that had enabled these schemes was being systematically dismantled. That evening, I sat in my home office, reviewing the nonprofit's quarterly report. We'd prevented 3 wrongful disbarments, helped expose 2 additional schemes, and provided legal assistance to 14 attorneys facing disciplinary action for crimes they didn't commit. My phone displayed a voicemail from a prosecutor in Baltimore. Another attorney had discovered shadow codes in their case management system. Another compliance advisor under investigation. Another opportunity to prevent what had happened to me from destroying someone else's career. I saved the quarterly reports and closed my laptop. Outside, the Delaware River reflected the setting sun, its surface calm and undisturbed. The old firm had survived the scandal, implementing new safeguards and rebuilding client trust. Several partners had reached out over the months, suggesting lunch meetings and potential collaborations. Professional courtesy demanded politeness, but I wasn't ready for that level of reconciliation. My practice was smaller now, more focused. Municipal law consulting, contract review, and compliance auditing for small firms. The work was satisfying in ways that corporate mergers and acquisitions had never been. Before leaving the office, I checked the trust account balances one final time. Every penny accounted for. Every transaction verified. Every client protected. The shadow codes were gone. The compliance advisor was in prison. The bar investigation was closed. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.